Welcome back to another reading and correcting of Bottom Rung with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervises. Today we're doing chapter 30. Mountain Sea was bright. That was the first thing Tibs thought of as where they were changed. He saw that instead of being close to the horizon, the sun was high, in a blue and cloudless sky. He forgot the brightness as someone pulled him off the platform. The attendant by the goal the attendant the attendant. By the gold he could see through the spots in his vision. Why is it so bright? Karina asked, blinking tears out of her eyes. It's only past noon here, the attendant replied. How is that possible? Khrushchev asked. It was close to sunset when we left. You'll have to find someone else to answer that, the attendant said. I have duties. Stay here until you've adjusted. Are we earlier? Karina asked. Or later? I thought the transport platform only moved us to other places. I hope you're not hoping I'll have the answer, Jekyll replied. You're the smart ones in this team, and Khrushchev is the local. If neither of you knows, did you know this would happen? She asked Tibbs. He stared at her. The spot's clear. I went inside a cavern when my teacher took me to the platform. How was it? Wasn't yours outside, Jekyll? He noticed the brightness He noticed the brightness wasn't caused only by the high sun, but the buildings were built from a pale stone that reflected the light. I don't remember the sun having moved. Are you guys okay to move? I feel exposed like this. Just don't ask me to run, Karina said. Why are the buildings like this? They should make them darker so we could see where we're going. It's to keep them cool, Khrushchev answered. It's not too bad this early in the hot season, but even with the wind coming from the sea, the buildings are going to get unbearably hot. Dark stones make the buildings hotter for some reason. He grinned. So it's a good thing the stones are cut from the mountain. It's a good thing the stones cut from the mountains are so pale. Come on, I know a place we can rest and eat. All that waiting in line made me hungry. The men started walking, and they followed them. Shouldn't this be the cold season? Tib asked. It's sort of lost track of the seasons, and with his town not getting cold, but he'd been taken from the city not long before the harvest festival, and he didn't think so much time had passed they'd gone through the cold and then rain season. Cold? That was months ago. No, I'm with Tibbs. Draco said, this should be start of the cold times. Kieran stared at him. No, it's the planting season. She looked around. The platform moved us in time. No, Khrushchev indicated the grid carved on the side of the column by the exit to the area up there. No. Okay, that's why. It's part of it. This is a period. Khrushchev indicated the grid carved in the side of a column by the exit. Khrushchev indicated a grid carved on the side of a column by the exit of the area the platform was in. This is the 14th day of Breathwell. It's the right day. I have no idea what that even means, Checo said. Different kingdoms, different calendars, Karina answered. But how can the day be right for you, but the season wrong for us? Tibbs didn't know and found he didn't care. The people he saw as they walked through the large street captured his attention. What they wore was in bright colors with sparkling jewels that made his fingers itch. The tents with merchants yelling over one another to the point that what they said became indistinguishable, and the way people moved from one to the other made what this place was clear to Tibbs. This was a marketplace. And the way people spoke, he understood some, but not most. What's wrong with the way they speak? He asked, indicating a group close enough to hear the sing-song that came out of their mouth. He got surprised expression from the others. That's Carillion, Khrushchev said. They're probably traders from one of the boats. So what's wrong with them? Tibbs asked. Nothing, Kirino answered with a chuckle. Carillion is a different language. She motioned to another group dressed in darker clothes. Those are Etherian, if you If you get close enough to listen, the language is deeper, more guttural. Most kingdoms speak their own language, and we're speaking Geralese, Khrushchev said. We're not, Kirina replied as Jackal stared at the man. I'm pretty sure I know my own tongue, the server stated. You're speaking Felinian, Jekyll said. He isn't, Kirina replied. Now they were all looking at her. It was because she seemed to understand what this was, and he wanted to know. The transport platform are magic, she said, and they nodded. That was obvious. And part of that magic did something to our mind that lets us understand each other, one another. Didn't you think it was odd everyone in town seems to speak our language? You expect me to think? Jekyll asked. I just figured the guild pulled everyone from places that spoke the same language, Joseph said. I'm street, Tibbs added, figuring that by now it was enough for his friends to understand. Didn't anyone speak differently? Jekyll asked him. Sure. Old Man Crooked Teeth's speech is so slurred it's impossible to understand him, but I thought it was the ale. Probably was, Kirina said with a chuckle. But the odds are, even on your street, some came from elsewhere and had to learn the language there. You can recognize those because they speak with an accent, sort of a mix of their languages and the new one they learned. Tibbs listened as they walked, trying to tease out the differences, but it quickly turned into a cacophony of sound, and then he was distracted by noticing the pockets. So many pockets, so many purses. Each one of them seemed to be filled with coins, and he wasn't in his town, so he could slip a finger in one if he felt like it. He caught the flash of metal at the periphery of his vision. At the periphery. Armor guards. Big guards. Mean looking. Mean looking where the one from his street had looked like they were having a good time. Tibbs wondered what the punishment for stealing was here and put his hand in his pockets. Those, at least, were safe for his fingers. You know, Jackal. You know, Jackal, Kirina said, if you want a shirt in different colors, I don't think it's going to be hard to find that here. She indicated a tent with fabrics hanging off a table. Bright reds, blues, even the greens was bright and pale. I'd attract just as much attention wearing those colors, the fighter replied. What's wrong with your shirt? Khrushchev asked. I like it. Makes you look like you're part of the new guards. That's the problem, Tim said, and Khrushchev stared at him. None of the runners like the guards, Jekyll said. Each one of us is there because a guard caught us. Oh, then why do you keep it? Jekyll grinned. I didn't know they were going to pick these colors. I can't help that they have great taste too. Tibbs exchanged a look with Carino. Jekyll was lucky Khrushchev didn't have any straight in him, because the fighter was horrible at lying. Where's that mountain you mentioned? Jekyll asked, and almost walked into Khrushchev as he stopped and turned to face him. The server placed both hands on Jekyll's shoulder before he could speak and spun him. Then Khrushchev placed a finger under the fighter's chin and raised his head. Tibbs turned to follow where he was having Jekyll look up, and found himself looking up, and still up. Okay, Karina said, awe in her voice. I think that was a stupid question. The cliffside of the mountain went up so high that Tibbs lost sight of it in the clouds. It looked to him like the city had been carved into the mountain. Crow, Karina said, tell me there are stairs going up to the peak? Tell me there's a platform to take us there, Jekyll said, and Khrushchev chuckled. There's a path, he indicated ahead of them, beyond the platform, wherever it was. Tibbs couldn't see it for all the buildings in the way. Just follow pathway to the cliff and you won't be able to miss it. He held Jekyll in place. But later, you promised you'd let me show you the city before you did whatever you need to do here. Whatever you need to do there. Whatever you need to do there. Okay. Tib wrenched his gaze from the cliffside. He was reconsidering walking up there. Yeah, Jekyll said, sounding cowed. We should make sure we enjoy this as a vacation before we turn it into a training session. He swallowed. A long training session. The inn was loud and joyful. Rosa's mother had been overjoyed to see him, as were his sisters and brothers. Tibbs was amazed at how many of them there were. The server had 3 brothers who were at the inn with their father. Tibbs counted 4 brothers and 6 sisters. Maybe. They moved about so much he had trouble keeping track of them. Here he discovered that Carino had here he discovered what Carino had meant about the magic of the platform. When he listened to a conversation between Krosef and his family, he understood the server, but not the other person. When one of them spoke with him, he had to speak first, then some of them. What? When one of them spoke with him, he had to speak first, then some of them would speak, so he understood. When one of them spoke with him, Tibbs okay, what the okay. When one of them spoke with him, okay. Wait, what did I just do? Here he discovered what Carino had meant about the magic of the platform. When he listened to a conversation between Krosef and his family, he understood the server but not the others. When one of them spoke with Tibbs, they had to speak, then one of the others would then one of the others would come and speak again. Tibbs would understand them. Kirino spoke of. I think this, my editor is going to be having words about me about this paragraph. When one of them spoke with Tibbs, they had to speak first. Then one of the others would come and speak again, and Tibbs would understand them and hear the accent Carino spoke of. Not. You know what? That's actually not needed. He found out he spoke a language called Persertian, and that Krosev's family had made sure every member learned a multitude of language so they could serve any customer that came to them. The welcome became a sea of joyous sound Tibbs didn't understand but enjoyed. Once the greeting was over, Tibbs noticed Jackal and Krosev talking in a corner. It was agitated enough, Tibbs gave in to his curiosity and moved until he could overhear the low voices. Never said I didn't like my family, Krosev said. It sounded like he was answering an accusation. I said I couldn't wait for the chance to get away from them. He motioned around them. Wouldn't you? Jekyll studied his face intently, then nodded. Tibbs turned back to the bustle of the room as the two moved closer. A minute later, Tibbs saw them move about, laughing and talking with a woman. The ale was good, and a lot of it flowed. Enough, Jekyll stood, declared his love for Krosev's mother, and danced with her. Tibbs went easy on the ale. He wanted to stay in control of his head. Giving in to the temptation of the pockets around him wouldn't be good. Not in Cross's family inn. He asked about the cliffside general gatherer and the Low Rock district. He only got that's toward the sea as an answer from one of Khrushchev's sister. Figured it was enough to start his search for the store. But before he could slip out of the inn, a different sister caught him and got him to recount stories about his adventures in the dungeon. Then, despite the sun still being bright, Tibbs found he couldn't stay awake anymore. And that's the bath, Joseph said, pointing to a building. They pipe the water from a a spring in the mountain, and it's hot. How are you so energetic? Jekyll complained. You weren't complaining last night, the server replied, grinning. Last night was last night. This is different. It's too bright and I don't know. Feels like I'm still half sleeping. You drank too much, Kirino said. Jekyll stared at her. There's no such thing as too much ale. Ale is how I relax. It's also how you ended up proposing to my mother, Joseph said. What? I did no such thing. You did, Tibbs said, looking at the building. They were made of large slab of stone, so finding cracks to take hold as he climbed would be tougher, but he thought the view atop one of them would be amazing. Looking down on the sloping city with whatever this sea was, or back to see more of the cliff. But I think you thought she was Khrushchev. You kept referring to things I don't think a woman's equipped to do. You let me say those things to your mother? Jekyll demanded, his voice a mix of horrified and awe. Khrushchev laughed. She runs an inn. Drunk saying far too much is a nightly occurrence. He blushed a little. It's what my brothers now know what we get up to that's embarrassing. You'd think they'd have enough with their own wives not to bother me about what I get up to in bed. He pulled Jekyll along. Come on, you have to experience the bath. I can't wait for someone to open one in the town. I'm going to. Kirina cut Tibbs's arm. You're staying with us. She followed Jekyll and Khrushchev. I'm not going to do anything, Tibbs protested. I can see how hard you push your hands in your pocket. Getting caught by a guard isn't going to help you with your plans. I'm not going to get caught. Then he hurried to say, I'm not going to do anything. It's still best if we stay together. This was a bad idea, Tibbs grumbled, having trouble keeping his eyes open. The bath had been nice, far too nice. The water had been hot, and he'd relaxed more than he thought possible. Now all he wanted to do was find a soft bed to lie on. That was a great idea, Jekyll replied, arm around Khrushchev's waist. That was pretty good, Kirina agreed. That towel boy seemed interested in you, the server said, and Kirina blushed. He's a little old to be called boy. It's a title, Khrushchev said, then pointed to a building. That's my aunt's sleeping house. She and her husband have nobility sleep there. Oh, that's Filligan's where you said you wanted a shirt, and that's the place to get it. I want a bed, Tibbs complained as Kirina pulled him along and they entered the shop. He'd been right. The view was beautiful from the roof, even at night. Claria was full. Her light shone and glimmered in the distance over what had to be the sea, since that was where he'd been told it was. The city was lit by torches and lanterns along the street, and a few of the shops had remained open once the sun set. To his left, closer to that side's cleft, was an area lit with something other than lanterns. The light coming from there was too white. Essence, Tibbs figured. Which made him wonder if everyone who graduated from the dungeon became adventurers. Okay, I know how to fix this. It was pointed out to me that Tibbs already know they don't all become adventurers since he's run into administration staff. So made him wonder if everyone who graduated from the dungeon always worked for the guild. That's how I fix this. Because that's a more valid question and one that Tibbs would wonder. Jekyll plopped next to him. I have no idea where he gets the energy from. He wore pants and nothing more. You're still awake, Tibbs pointed out. Jekyll snorted. I'm not the one who... I don't want to know, Tibbs interrupted. Jekyll laughed. One day, Tibbs, you'll be curious about it, and you will not regret it. Tibbs shrugged. Aren't you worried? Jekyll raised an eyebrow. This is me, Tibbs. I don't do worried. Tibbs snorted. No one's around. It's just me. You don't have to pretend. He fell silent. We're going to die. The dungeon's going to eat us. Krosev's going to lose you. Isn't that cruel? Jekyll looked into the distance. He knows I'm a runner. He knows the danger I face. He chose to be with me. But it's going to hurt. Tibbs, you can't let pain of something that might happen keep you from living. I grew up fighting. First my siblings, then in the pits. I was always going to die in those, so I did everything I could to enjoy life in the meantime. He motioned around. This isn't any different. You're right. I'll probably die in the dungeon, but until then I intend to live. I just don't want to hurt someone the way it hurts me. Tibbs pulled his knees to himself. That's fair. I didn't lose my mother the way you did. I got to know her. She was a good woman. I had others to help me through their death, although their methods left something to be desired, he said bitterly. But if there's someone you want to spend time with, just be honest with them about the dangers. Let them decide if the risks are worth it. The fighter smiled. Then enjoy the fun you have. This made a gagging sound, and Jekyll laughed. They were silent for a while. Are you going to walk the roofs? Jekyll asked, standing. Probably. The sun's going to be up soon. That is so strange. It feels like morning came hours ago, but it's still dark. Don't go too far, okay? Crow wants to take us to one of the marketplaces. Then there's the arena. Are you going to fight? No. The dungeon is something I have to do. The arena would be my choice, my decision to put myself at risk. I'm not going to do that to him. Tib stood. I'll be back before the sun's over the horizon. He ran along the roof and jumped to the next one. He couldn't get to the shop in the dark, but he could at least locate the Low Rock district. Then, if he could give his friends the slip, Krosev, then, this is a new phrase. Really? Then if he could give his friends the slip while Krosev showed them the city, he'd deal with the task Bardik gave him and not have to worry about it while he accomplished his own. The arena had been strange to Tibs. He was used to people fighting. On the street, it was the main way disputes were settled. But in the arena, there had been rules imposed. Some fights had only allowed unarmed fighting, others required the use of a shield, while some had them fight against animals. Those disturbed Tibs the most. It felt unfair to force animals to fight. It wasn't like those were dungeon-made creatures. They were ordinary animals, even if the roar one of them had let out made him shake in his seat. In the chaos of erupting cheers at something Tibbs couldn't see because everyone stood, he found he'd lost the battle of will with his fingers. He pulled a copper coin from a pocket and immediately felt like he should put it back. He wasn't on the street anymore. He had more coins than he'd ever had. He didn't need to pick a pocket to survive. It wasn't like the person he'd taken it from would miss it either, he told himself as he pocketed the coin. It was just copper. It was just copper, and off the street, just copper, and off the street, copper was sort of meaningless, wasn't it? And he was a rogue. He needed to practice. There was only so much he could do with a training dummy, so a copper wouldn't be too bad, he decided. It would be enough to show he'd done it without ruining the person whose pocket he'd picked, and it forced him to discern who had coppers and who had more valuable coins. He wondered what gold coins looked like, felt like. Then the cheering was done and everyone was back down, and Tibbs forced himself to look at the fighting. I wish I could stay longer, Krosev said at the bottom of the stairs to the transport platform. I could go up to the mountain with you, help out. Jekyll smiled. It's not exactly something you can help with. It's an essence thing. But I'll be back soon. I'll just walk up. It's just a walk up and down. Krosev chuckled. Enjoy the walk then. They kissed, and Krosev stepped onto the platform, handing the multicolored coin to the attendant. They stepped to the center, and Krosev waved at them as they vanished in the golden glitter of light. That I need to change. It's no longer gold. In a color shifting glitter of light. And that concludes chapter 30 of Bottom Rung. If you are enjoying this, subscribe and hit the bell. Share, like, tell your friends. If you want to read the story, it is on Royal Road. The link is in the notes, as is the link to my Patreon, should you wish to support me. With that, I shall wish you a good day.